off the coast of Ukraine, in the far northwest of the Black Sea, there's a tiny rock barely bigger than a few football fields. On the map, it's almost too small to notice. Its name is Snake Island. For most of its history, it was home to little more than a lighthouse, a handful of buildings, and a small garrison. Nobody paid it much attention at all. That changed on the morning of February 24th, 2022. This was the day Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Missiles striking cities, columns of tanks pouring across the border. And in the middle of that chaos, this obscure little island became the stage for a story that, within hours, the entire world would be repeating. Stationed on the island was a small group of Ukrainian border guards. The number most often given is 13. They had light weapons, a radio, and a duty that had, in an instant, turned deadly serious. Because appearing on the horizon, closing in fast, were warships of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Leading the approach was the Moskva, the flagship of the entire Black Sea Fleet. She was a guided missile cruiser, over 180 meters long, bristling with weapons and the pride of the Russian Navy in the region. Against this floating fortress stood a dozen or so men on a bare rock, with nowhere to run and no reinforcements coming. The radio crackled with a demand, calm and absolute. A Russian officer's voice announced, "This is a Russian warship. I propose you lay down your weapons and surrender to avoid bloodshed and unnecessary casualties. Otherwise, you will be bombed." It was not really a request. To the men on the island, it sounded like a simple choice between surrender and death. There was a pause on the line. The defenders talked quietly among themselves. And then one Ukrainian border guard keyed his radio and gave a reply, short, blunt, and utterly defiant. It was too crude to repeat politely, but the meaning was crystal clear. In effect, he told the mighty Russian warship exactly where it could go. It was the sound of 13 men, hopelessly outgunned and completely surrounded, refusing to be afraid. There was no bravado about survival in it, only defiance. And then, moments later, the island fell silent, and contact with the defenders was lost. In the fog of that first, terrifying day of the war, no one knew what had happened to the men on the island. Fearing the worst, Ukrainian officials announced that all the defenders had been killed. President Zelensky said they would be posthumously honored as heroes of Ukraine. The story detonated across the world. That single defiant reply became an instant rallying cry, because it captured everything about the moment Ukraine was living through. A smaller nation, told by an overwhelming enemy to surrender, simply and profanely refusing. It was fear turned inside out and hurled back at the invader. The phrase appeared on murals, on t-shirts, on billboards. Ukraine's postal service even issued a stamp depicting a lone soldier on the shore, facing down the warship with a rude gesture. For a country fighting for its life, 13 men on a rock had become proof that defiance was still possible. It would be easy to assume the fight for Snake Island was purely symbolic, a matter of pride on both sides. But the little rock had real strategic value. And that's why the war kept circling back to it. Its position, sitting near vital shipping lanes in the northwestern Black Sea, made it a natural outpost for anyone wanting to control the waters off Ukraine's coast. Whoever held the island could place radar and air defense systems on it, extending their reach far out over the sea and threatening ships and aircraft for miles around. For Russia, holding Snake Island was a step toward dominating the Black Sea and choking off Ukraine's coastline. For Ukraine, letting it go meant handing the enemy a fortified eye in the sky. And there was something even bigger at stake: grain. Ukraine is one of the world's great exporters of wheat and sunflower oil, and almost all of it leaves through Black Sea ports. Control of the sea lanes near Snake Island had a direct line to whether that food could reach the world, affecting prices on tables continents away. So this was never just a story about a defiant phrase. It was a fight over a tiny piece of land that sat on top of shipping routes, air defense coverage, and the food supply of distant nations. A rock you could walk across in minutes had become a genuine strategic prize, which is exactly why neither side was willing to simply let it go. But in the days that followed, a very different truth began to emerge. The defenders had not all been killed. Cut off, out of ammunition, and with no possibility of rescue, they had eventually been forced to surrender and had been taken prisoner by the Russian forces. They were, against all the early reports, alive. For their families, it was a second shock stacked on the first, grief giving way cautiously to hope. The Ukrainian government confirmed the men were being held as prisoners of war and vowed to bring them home. The legend of the last stand now had living people at the center of it. Months later, that promise was kept. In a prisoner exchange, the Snake Island defenders were returned to Ukraine. The border guard, whose furious reply had been heard around the world, walked free back to his own country. A man who had become a national legend simply by doing his duty, refusing to bow on a rock in the middle of the sea. The story of Snake Island didn't end with the men. There was still the matter of the warship. In April 2022, the Moskva, that same flagship that had demanded their surrender, caught fire and sank in the Black Sea. It was the largest warship lost in combat in decades, and the humiliation for Russia's navy was profound. Ukraine claimed it had struck the cruiser with 2 of its own Neptune anti-ship missiles, a weapon its engineers had developed largely in secret. Russia offered a different account, blaming an onboard fire and an explosion of ammunition. Whatever the exact cause, the outcome was undeniable. The flagship of the Black Sea Fleet was gone, resting on the seafloor. For Ukrainians, the symbolism was almost too perfect. The very warship whose officer had demanded that 13 men surrender, the ship they had so famously told to go to hell, now lay at the bottom of the same sea. It felt, to a nation desperate for good news, like the island had been avenged. Russia occupied the island itself, but holding it proved brutal. Exposed and far from support, the tiny garrison became a magnet for Ukrainian drones and missiles, hammered month after month, until the rock cost more to hold than it was worth. By the summer of 2022, Russian forces abandoned it, and Ukraine raised its flag over the island once more. A tiny, almost worthless speck of land had tied down a fleet, helped sink a flagship, inspired a nation at its darkest hour, and refused to stay conquered. And it all began with 13 men, 1 warship, and a single unforgettable answer. Proof that in war, the loudest weapon of all is sometimes just a refusal to be afraid.